Hi, so my name's Michelle Carvill, and I'm going to be talking about the myths of social media. And as you can see there is a book, Myths of Social Media. That was the first edition of Myths of Social Media, and the second edition is coming out early October this year. So this time I'm bringing to you 5 different myths than the myths we busted last year with Luann. So the myths I'm going to cover with you today are, as you can see there, social media is purely a marketing function. Social media is no use for internal communication. Business leaders don't need a presence on social media. Social media is not strategic. And last but not least, social media influencers are a new phenomenon. So in the book, we cover 30 myths. And last year I shared 5. Now I'm sharing another 5. So there's another 20 within the book for you still to explore in more detail. And of course, I'm only here for half an hour, so I'm just bringing you a snippet of these myths, just some top line stuff to whet your appetite, but also give you enough to consider where you need to go and things to think about. So, okay, the first myth, let's get started. So, social media activity is purely a marketing function. And of course, social media may often sit within marketing teams, or it may indeed sit on its own. So, here is some insights from the We Are Social Hootsuite Digital 2022. Every year they put a report together, and this is just some of the social trends that were highlighted from Hootsuite. And as you can see there, trend 3, social quietly matures out of the marketing department as marketers become more confident in measuring the ROI, the return on investment of their social media efforts. High performers are spreading the love across the rest of the organization. And if we think about spreading the love across the rest of the organization, let's really have a think about where social media impacts. Because yes, of course, it's often used for lead generation and demand generation and for marketing and for brand. But of course, it's also used for things like customer service. Many organizations, most consumer facing organizations now have some form of social media presence to offer some form of support. You'll see it from many of the major grocers, Marks and Spencer, Waitrose, Tesco. They all have this support mechanism. You'll see it from many of the railway services, such as Great West, Western Rail. They will have their support service. So increasingly, social media is utilized for customer service, and you may be utilizing it as part of customer service within your own organizations. And if you are, is that joined up? Are the insights joined up that are being generated and listened to and heard from the customer service team with the marketing team? So, this is where we really need to be thinking about how we integrate social media as that report was just stating. Of course, it's also a big part of HR recruitment, positioning our employer brand. This is a great place to work. This is why you would want to come and work here. Look at our amazing employees. Employees are often potentially thought leaders doing their own things on social media. So again, it's got that presentation and positioning of the brand and the organization to the outside world from an employer brand perspective. So not just using recruitment from an advertising perspective, putting out ads and saying we are hiring, but actually building that brand proposition as to differentiating yourself, making yourself an attractive proposition for employers to want to come and work with you. And of course, as the war for talent increases, then of course, employer brand becomes increasingly more important. PR, of course, there aren't many PR agencies now. There aren't many journalists, many trade journals that aren't using social media. So, of course, it is important for us to be thinking about social PR and how we are optimizing it for that. And again, if you've got PR teams within your organization, is this all integrated? Are you talking to each other? Business development, sometimes referred to as social selling, but there's no escaping the importance and relevance of making sure that business development teams, sales teams are listening in and understanding the nuances and shifts that are going on within their client accounts or prospective clients so that they can stay close, they can listen, they can drip feed information, they can make announcements, they can go back and congratulate people or console people if things have changed within the organizations that they are working with. So again, it is, the perfect social network, really, with regards to business development and staying close from that perspective. And of course, the things that we are, from a marketing perspective, I suppose, more aligned with is around managing our brand, our reputation, building trust, making sure that we are consistent with our cohesive brand messaging so that we get people to know us, to like us, to trust us, and then to ultimately do business with us. And of course, from a brand management and brand reputation perspective, we don't turn our social media channels off, just like we don't turn our websites off. So these are far-reaching brand channels. They are out there, and therefore, from a brand perspective, building brand awareness, driving loyalty, building trust, these are key channels that help us to showcase who we are, what we want to be known for, what it is we exist for, the work that we do, the impacts that we make, the differences, our employees, the products and services we provide are all part of that bigger narrative when it comes to brand. Of course, we do utilize social media, as we use many marketing channels, for lead generation, demand generation, driving conversion, whatever that may look like for you, whether that's to sell something, whether that's to unite people, whether that's to bring people closer to the organization, whether that gets them to buy something, or whether it's getting them to do something. Or become involved and part of something, for a whole number of reasons. That lead generation, of course, is an important component, as is, of course, building networks, developing partnerships, spotting influencer or partnership opportunities. And of course, last but not least, research, understanding what's going on within the landscape with which you are operating, staying close to competitors, staying close to your landscape, staying close to key stakeholders like your customers. Maybe that's investors, maybe it's territories that you need to be aware of. So social covers many, many areas. It isn't just this marketing function. If we plug social media in, you can see how it works across the entire organization to support the overarching business objectives. So from a marketing perspective, HR, even maybe technology, sales, as we'll talk about internal communication. So, social media can be utilized for internal communication. So from the tech side of things, sales, that business development element, the research and development, so bringing some of that intelligence coming maybe out of customer services, maybe coming back in from the things that you are listening to from customers or employees, gripes, concerns, or absolute love and praise, feeding that back in to potentially research and development of new products, new services, different ways of doing things. And of course, business development. Remember, organizations and brands like Danone, for example, famously talk about how important the development of social media is, and the listening on social media, and the understanding what's going on within their audiences to innovate, where they are hearing people getting stuck with taking lids off their products, or they can't undo the wrappers, and some of those pesky little pulls and things on food products. Many of those insights are fed back into the R&D teams so that they can innovate and make things and the user experience so much more seamless for the customers. And many of those insights come from what they are hearing in the landscape around social media. So again, think about how you are plugging social media into the entire organization. It isn't just the marketing department. And of course, across that organization, there may be thought leadership that you can be tapping into, various elements of business intelligence around stats and facts and data and insights, good news stories. There's a lot that can be pulled from the inside of the organization to showcase your brand, to tell that story. So don't operate in a silo just from the marketing team. Think about how social media can be plugged in and how you can be extracting some of those insights from the business to be sharing out with regards to your brand and your positioning, employer brand, all of those other aspects. So it starts to work as a cohesive essence throughout the entire business. It's a truly social endeavor. Of course, let's get on to myth number 2 now. So social media is of no use for internal communications. Well, we've kind of just blown that myth a little bit here when we've been talking about how it could actually be utilized just as a service to the rest of the business. But if we think about some of the key elements around using some of the tech that has enabled people to connect and communicate better, we can see here that we've got tech like Salesforce Chatter, Twitter, WhatsApp groups, Slack, Yammer, Facebook or Meta's Workplace, which some of you may be utilizing and already, and may have done so post-COVID or may have been doing so pre-COVID. I love this little business cartoon. Who led the digital transformation for your company? The CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? And tick the box there, COVID-19, because absolutely we've seen people adapt and engage with social technologies so much more. Businesses had to transform very, very quickly from their tech position to engaging with employees in whichever ways they could. And therefore, it meant that online networks were utilized often to connect and collaborate with homebound team members. And that meant organizations could realize the benefits and tap into the potential of social media, bringing that community aspect, that social aspect among employees, and also assisting with the very tangible improvements in employee engagement, productivity, innovation, and ultimately profitability. Because if we don't have productive team members, if they're not feeling engaged, if they're not feeling heard, there's all sorts of challenges that can raise for the workforce. So some of the stats here around connecting and communicating with employees. This is from the Gallup poll 2021. 80% of the workforce are not engaged at work. So the average worker spends 13 hours per week on emails alone. 28% of the working week is taken up by email management. 86% of corporate executives, employees, and educators say that ineffective communication is a big reason for failure in the workplace. And 58% say poor management is the biggest challenge getting in the way of productivity. And a McKinsey Global Institute report recently said a rise in productivity of 20 to 25% when using social media technologies to enhance communications, knowledge sharing, and collaboration. So if we know that there's only 20% of the workforce that are really jumping out of bed and feeling highly engaged at work, and we've got the majority stating that they are not as engaged, and a lot of that is down to ineffective communication, then of course social technologies act like a glue, bringing people together. And also it kind of makes sense, because if people, I mean, we know that more than half, 98% of internet users are using social media. So think about your own usage. There will be channels that you have. Some of it will be very much to do with speaking to your friends and family and chatting with mates, but some of it will be done potentially around how you connect and communicate within work, where it's permitted. So WhatsApp groups, Slack, Yammer, chat, some of those other things that we saw. And of course, many of those symbolize and behave in the same way as our kind of regular social media channels, more of those mainstream kind of less corporate social media channels, but they are echoing the behavior and the sentiment and the social connectivity. And so if you think about that McKinsey Institute report showcasing that there was a 20 to 25% increase in productivity when using social media technologies, then it certainly busts that myth that social media is no good for internal communications. I mean, if we just do the maths on those numbers about that loss of productivity, there are estimated 32.3 million people employed in the UK. I mean, that number keeps changing because of where we are in the world right now. And if we've got that 80% not engaged or actively disengaged, and we work with that number, it was Ernst & Young did a piece of research around the cost of individual employee disengagement. And they did a study and they got it to approximately $10,000 actually in profit per employee annually. So what I've done to get to this enormous number, and this number is just shy of, or just over, 21.5 billion pounds, because I looked at the exchange rate, and so I calculated this in pounds rather than dollars. That is the annual cost of disconnected employee engagement, or that employee disengagement, those disconnected employees, that 80%, because they are not feeling connected with the organization. And if we know that being more connected and communicated with is a key component, and we know that social technologies are a big part of that, you take that 20 to 25% of this number, and that is a huge cost saving for organisations in the UK. And of course, that's just looking at the UK numbers and figures. These numbers would get significantly enormous if we start to bring in other territories like the US. So, you know, there's a huge business case for internal communication being done as effectively as possible so that people feel heard, engaged, and connected to. And of course, social technologies can be a brilliant enabler of that. So moving on now to myth number 3, business leaders don't need a presence on social media. And of course, this kind of tallies very nicely with myth number 2, where we've just been talking about internal communication, because of course, many leaders feel very disconnected from the organizations that they lead, or seem disconnected often. Sometimes there's this kind of hierarchy, isn't it, that people don't feel that they can talk to the leader, and the leader certainly wouldn't walk past their desk every day and have a regular chat with them, because they may be in a different territory, they may be in a different office, or they just may never get that opportunity. So let's look at some of the stats around leadership and social media expectations. 74% of people want leaders and senior execs to speak openly on social media. There's an expectation that leaders and execs need to be present on social media. They need to be visible. Only 51% of employees say their company leaders are using social media to reach them and their co-workers, so they're not engaging in those kind of social connectivity, conversational endeavors. 78% believe CEOs should be personally visible, and 56% expect CEOs to speak publicly on societal issues they care about. And of course, as we move into more of the challenges around climate change and cost of living crisis, those expectations become ever more evident and more conscious and more meaningful to key stakeholders, employees, customers. These are key societal issues on everybody's radar. So the other key question to think about when it comes to communicating and how leaders do connect and whether or not they do need a presence on social media is to think about what that communication and what that presence looks like. If it's all about simply that leader is just broadcasting and just showcasing, almost using it like a PR channel to say, this is the latest news, this is what we're doing, this is what it is, but there's actually no conversation, that isn't effective communication. So questions to think about here within your own organization and within your own practice when it comes to utilizing and engaging people with social media is, are you engaging employees in a conversation? Which means, are you listening to them? And my question is, when was the last time you explored the views of employees? And as a leader, if that's your position, when was the last time you explored the views of the people that you are leading? Do you get your employees engaging in building internal communication solutions? Are you talking to them about what their preferred channels are? Are you understanding what's going to work within the organizational culture and boundaries that you work within? So as I said at the beginning, many leaders are disconnected from the very people they lead. And to lead is to influence, and to influence, you absolutely need to be visible. It's very difficult to influence people if you're not visible, if you don't have that presence, or that presence is very fleeting, because then it's almost a little bit of a one-hit wonder, and you are not building that opportunity to get people to know you, to like you, and to trust you, because you are just not visible. So when it comes to trust, 85% of people trust leaders who are on social media. 86% would prefer to work at a place where leaders are on social media and more visible and engaged. And 82% of people feel more confident that leaders on social media are equipped to lead in the digital age. Now, this was a study done pre-COVID-19 by Brandfog, but I can echo that a later study done by Brunswick sits with very, very similar, if not increased, statistics around some of these points. And being a connected leader, of course, you are leading by example. You can share your knowledge. You can listen and learn, which is hugely important, and a huge part of our social endeavour is that conversational aspect. It's not just about broadcasting, it's about real communication. And real communication is all about the listening. In a conversation, you learn so much more if you use your ears and your eyes more than you use that mouth. And I always talk about that. We have 2 ears, 2 eyes, just the one mouth. Think about that balance when you are communicating. Of course, from an employee perspective, it builds trust, it builds engagement, it builds that sense of being involved, that sense of belonging, which of course people want to feel with the work that they do. People are spending all that time at work, as we saw earlier. So of course you want to feel like you're involved, that you matter, that you're heard when you are at work. And it's those elements that fall apart that lead to that disconnection and that 80%, enormous number, 80% of people not feeling engaged and connected with at work. So, how can you engender that? By utilizing social technologies. And of course, these social technologies with that leader's position also speak to the outer world, not just the inner world of the employees, but that outer world, to the brand, to the values, showcasing why you exist, who you are, what you want to be known for and seen as in the world. And of course, with customers as another segment of your key stakeholders, that builds trust, that shares the value. Remember, 77% of people buy from a brand or a business because they have shared values. If you're not talking about your values, if you're not sharing those values, it's very difficult to connect with customers and indeed with your employees, to drive that loyalty, to drive that involvement, to drive that belonging. So social technologies enable leaders to walk the floor. Walking the floor, Tom Peters, writer and management guru, for many, many years has encouraged leaders to manage by wandering around, really walking the floor, understanding what's really going on within your business. And social technologies enable that. They enable that connection and that understanding of what's really going on at the grassroots, allowing leaders to walk the floor, but at scale. You don't even necessarily need to be in the same building, the same room. I'm not saying that's the right way to do things, but social technologies enable you to do that, to walk the floor at scale. And it also gives, importantly, as I said earlier, leaders the opportunity to listen. When I wrote a book, Get Social, which is a social media strategy for leaders, specifically for leaders, I thought, well, I'm not just going to talk about what I know about this. I'm going to bring in other leaders who are really active on social media and really understand the value that this is bringing to the business, so they can showcase what it means for them. And in that book, and I went on to create a podcast called The Connected Leader, where I interviewed over 35 additional leaders than those I'd interviewed in the book. So, 45, almost 50 case studies as to speaking to senior leaders, CEOs of often major global corporate organizations, asking them what was the most important aspect of utilizing social media. And without exception, every single one of them said the ability to listen. They didn't talk about being visible or getting their voice out there or anything, the ability to listen. And I remember John Terode of T-Mobile told me that via listening, whilst it wasn't statistically accurate, it gave him a direct window into his what his employees were thinking, what his competitors were up to, and what customers were doing and saying. And whilst he was challenged internally by many teams saying, oh, well, this isn't statistically correct, all of this data, he said it gave him enough to make decisions that drove significant success for his business. So really thinking about the position of leadership, and of course taking your own leadership around social media within the organization. Myth number 4, social media is not strategic. Well, I touched on this a little bit in the myths that I did last year with Luann, so you'll be able to kind of look back at that historic kind of little the video insights for the myths that we did last year. But social media is not strategic. So of course, if social media isn't strategic, what are the challenges that we have without having a clear strategy about anything that we do? So if we don't have a strategy, we have no targets, we have no measurable return on investment, we have no idea what's going right, what's going wrong, and what to improve. It's very difficult to get buy-in from a team or the leadership team if you can't showcase the return on investment and the value creation that you are bringing to a business with the endeavors that you are doing. So again, very difficult to get buy-in. There's a big so what factor. There's no alignment with commercial direction, so you're not showcasing the value that you are bringing directly to meet the objectives of the business. There's a lot of wasted energy, a lot of wasted resource, which can be extremely costly. And of course, if you are acting just almost, play and spray and just hope enough spaghetti sticks at the wall, it's what I refer to as you're just filling the feeds, kind of, let's schedule up some posts so there's something going out in the feeds without any strategic endeavor. It really is just a case of filling the feeds. You are going to miss important opportunity, and also you're going to miss important insights, because if you're not acting strategically, you're not part of that conversation. You're not listening seriously, and therefore you're not understanding what's really going out with the content or the insights or what it is that you are doing out into the world. It really is just a case of operating in a very lackluster and short-sighted way. But social strategy not being aligned to those business outcomes is an issue. And it's interesting that, only 34% of businesses felt that their social strategy was connected to business outcomes. And I find that startling, because then you can't justify, there can't be any clarity on the impact that social media is having on the business. There can't be any clarity about the return on investment that you are bringing to the business for all of the investment that's got into it. There might be a people resource to do this, content development that's required, the channel platform payments, maybe some analysis tools that you're paying for, etc., etc. And of course, there's no clarity on any of the return on that, because the social signals, such as followers increasing or likes on posts, engagements, comments, etc., they're all good for you to be keeping your eye on, because of course that's going to be an indication of whether you've got the right audience, whether your content is landing, whether you're getting people to engage, etc., etc. But they do not usually directly correlate to any direct bottom line impact to the business. I mean, I've sat around enough boardrooms now over the last couple of decades where people have presented their social reports, and you'll have directors saying, yeah, we got more followers, so what does that mean? Oh, we got an amazing level of engagement on the post. Great. What does that mean? How does this impact the business? And this is where as marketers and as social media marketers, we really need to be joining up those elements and being so much more strategic. It is a strategic endeavor. And strategy is strategy, whether this is your social media strategy, your marketing strategy, your business strategy, your content strategy. There are stages that we think about. And that first stage is, where are we right now? The situation analysis, where are our customers? Which channels are they on? What do they care about? Who are they? What's the business landscape that we're operating in? What are our competitors doing? What audiences? Where are our audiences? What do they like? What frustrates them? What are their pain points? How many audiences do we have? Are our audiences on different channels? And do we need to be doing different things on different channels based on the different needs and requirements of our audiences? So the first thing is understanding all of that information and understanding where you are right now. And then, of course, it's about understanding the objectives and goals that you are looking to achieve, not just in the context of your social media, like, oh, we want to get more followers, we want to get more engagement, because remember, they don't necessarily tap into the overarching success of the business. That's more tactical. What you want to really get to is understanding, what is this business trying to achieve, and how can I use social media, and how can I evidence that social media is actually supporting the objectives and goals of this business. So you really need to get really clear on what the objectives and goals are, those bigger overarching objectives and goals of the business that can be impacted by social media. And then, of course, you have your channel mix. Which channels are we going to use? Which content do I need to develop to align? Which channels make sense for our audiences? But of course, in knowing that, you've got to understand your audiences better. And then, of course, you move into the tactics, the kind of doing phase, the building out, the plans, the campaigns, the activity, the getting down into the detail of what content you need to be served to which audiences. This area, you'd also be thinking about which elements are organic, which is brand focused, which elements are paid, and which is, what are we trying to do with our paid activity, demand generation, brand awareness, new territories, whatever that looks like, you'd be getting into the tactics of that planning. And then, of course, last but definitely not least, measurement and KPIs would be that ability to ensure that you can measure your performance against those overarching objectives. So the key there is to make sure that you know what you're measuring, and also to make sure that you have the mechanisms in place to be able to attribute and be accountable for the activity that you are doing. So to illustrate an example of that, let's say a business objective of a university is to drive more students to take a specific course at a university. If that course doesn't get filled, it might mean that the course has to stop, which could mean, significant. It may be that that's a big reputational course for the university. It could be that they've got the leading people on the planet, delivering that course, and it's a big kudos. So it's important that they get these students to take that specific course. So, of course, what things could social media do? Well, it isn't, you won't see here anything to do with, oh, we can get more followers, we can get more likes, we can get more engagement. What social media needs to be driving towards is, how can we use social media to drive more visits to that particular landing page? How can we use social media to download more, get people to download the course prospectus? How can we use social media to drive more contact form inquiries and ultimately lead to more course bookings? So what you have to do is understand what those KPIs and objectives are, break down those KPIs, and then almost engineer what your social media activity and campaigns are going to be, that you can feasibly do, and how you're going to measure the impact and the value that you are creating. So it's really important to start with the end in mind. I love this statement from Zig Ziglar: those that aim for nothing hit it with remarkable accuracy. So don't be a filling the feed kind of social media person and operate in that way. Get strategic, really understand the overarching requirements and needs of the business, and then make sure that you are doing everything that you can with your social media activity, organically, paid, content development, whatever that looks like, to drive forward so that you can start to showcase the impact that your social media is having from a return on investment perspective and the value creation that you are bringing back to the business. I would also say here that there are many other periphery aspects around brand and awareness. You might be opportunity spotting and bringing in influencers to the business. You might be driving some partnerships that are really valuable to the business and building out some valuable networks. You might be getting some case studies in that ordinarily would have taken a lot of time or paid out to an agency or a PR agency to develop those for you, that you're spotting and going back to people on the platforms and saying, that's amazing. Could we turn that into a case study about what you've just done? Think about all the periphery value that social media can do rather than just creating content and pushing it out. Start looking, start listening, and start getting really strategic with the value you create with your social media activity. And so, last but not least, myth number 5, social media influencers are a new phenomenon. So, I've been in marketing a very long time, and I guess what social media has really kind of accelerated the democracy of there being now many influencers. Influencers aren't just the Kim Kardashians of the world anymore. Influencers may be your own customers. They may be your own employees. And they are, or people who are just relevant in your industry that have built their own presence, sometimes on social media, sometimes not. And of course, therefore, this relationship marketing, this joint venture, you do something for me and I'll do something for you, or I'm trying to get into a bigger audience. Can we partner so that I can get my content and ideas in front of your audience? And then I'll let you get your content and ideas in front of my audience. Or if you let me get my content and ideas in front of your audience, I'll pay for you to do that, or I'll give you something in order for you to do that. And so really, it's not a new phenomenon. People have been doing relationship marketing, joint ventures, since marketing began. However, social media has transitioned that quite significantly. I like this positioning from Mark Schaefer here. Research shows that trust in companies, ads and brands has declined for 10 consecutive years. Who do people trust? Each other. Influencers aren't just business leaders or technical experts. They are seen as trusted friends. There is no better way to cut through the information density of content shock than with the clear, passionate voice of a trusted friend. So it's kind of this optimizing and word of mouth marketing, isn't it? By getting somebody of influence to say something really positive about your product or service. But thinking about that relationship as them being trusted friends. So when you're thinking about your influencer campaigns and your program considerations, it's got to be win-win. It's got to be working in collaboration, making sure that you are developing a brief and bringing absolute clarity around the expectations. What is expected of them, how much content you expect them to post, when you expect them to post, what you expect them to do, how long for, all of those details. Don't skimp on the detail, because most influencer partnerships go a little bit awry because the detail hasn't been really nailed down. You can develop content together, set clear boundaries and timelines for both parties, sign off and set regular reviews, etc. Building that relationship, building that trusted friendship, and of course including any other organizational T's and C's that may be applicable. And again, you might be, depending on how you're working with your influencer when you're developing a program or a campaign, it might be that you're gifting them something, it might be that you're paying them, it might be that they're working on a long-term collaboration with you, and therefore there's a different kind of aspect to the relationship. But whichever way that you are working, think about making sure that you manage your influencer campaign and program like a project. Get really clear what's in it for you, what's in it for them, how can you work together to develop things. They're going to know their audience really well. You're going to have selected them probably because they do the content or they know the audience really well, and so trust that they know their audience better, and they are going to help you to get your message across in a way that makes sense for their audience. They're not just going to do something that is all about you. It's got to make sense for their audience, because it's their reputation on the line as well, and their relationships that they've already built. So when you're thinking about those programs, also think about what you're looking to achieve with your influencer program. Again, it comes back to that strategy piece, doesn't it? What are the objectives? What is it that you are looking to achieve? What does success look like? And where does it fit along your customer journey? Are you trying to build awareness? Are you trying to get people to convert? Are you trying to get people to become advocates? Which channels are going to be relevant? And maybe different channels may be relevant at different stages of that customer journey. And of course, identify those channels that make sense for you and your audience, because that may also give you an idea as to who you want to work with. So for example, if you want to break into TikTok, you'd want to be working with somebody who was a really great influencer on TikTok, or really understood that channel really well, rather than saying, well, we want you're a great influencer on TikTok, we want to bring you over to LinkedIn. That might not quite jar. So identify the channels, identify the program, and think about where that fits as to the objectives of what it is you are trying to achieve. You can see here some channels taken from the Influencer Marketing Benchmark Report 2022. Influencer campaign channel utilization, which channels people are utilizing: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can see that Instagram is dominating there, fastly followed by TikTok and Facebook. But really, again, coming back to that strategy piece, getting clarity on what you want your influence programs to bring to the business. Is it awareness? Is it sales? Is it that you're trying to drive user-generated content? We've recently worked on some influencer programs, micro-influencer programs with a client of ours. And that was because they wanted to fill some content gaps. The focus wasn't really on sales or awareness. It was really that they'd identified that they had some really key content gaps, questions that kept getting asked, and they just didn't have the content to demonstrate how this product worked in the real world. So that was the driving force behind the influencer program. So think about what your driving force is behind why you want to develop an influencer program and work with influencers. And then, of course, you can drill down to those specific aspects that you want them to think about, and you want to really tick on there. So as you can see, we've got those top line things, and then we've got, moving down into more detail there. So again, get clarity, coming back to what is it that you are looking to achieve. And remember that influencers come in all shapes and sizes. As I said, they are not just the Kim Kardashians of this world and the celebrity, as you can see over to the bottom right corner there, but you've also got journalists and industry experts and bloggers and thought leaders and subject matter experts, and academics can be influencers, business leaders, employees, your own internal subject matter experts, teachers, professionals, topical community, people coming from the community with reputational or product category aspects, brand advocates, could be political, could be a politician, civil servant, a lobbyist, and of course, some of these that are more, I suppose, that initially were more seen on social media, like actors, musicians, sports stars, TV personas. But of course, influence is that subject matter expert. They are people, they may be your own employees, they may be your own customers who have grown a following, and have got, they are the trusted friends that you can tap into to get to their audiences. So that is 5 more myths that we've busted out of Myths of Social Media. As I said, the second edition is due out on the 6th of October, so just a couple of weeks. And if you'd like to hear more about myths, and if you'd like to connect with me, my name's Michelle Carvill. You'll find me at Michelle Carvill, and I look forward to hearing any questions, any feedback, etc., etc. That's all from me. Enjoy the rest of the event.